What's up, guys? Philip at Trade Genius. All right, we're going to take a look at Bitcoin. Important update because not only do we have a weekly close, but we also have the monthly close and a quarterly close. So let's check it out and see what this week has in store for us.
Trade Genius.
All right, guys, this is the quarterly chart. We had a decent quarterly close, green candle. Haven't seen that since the middle of 2018. So that shows us price stability. You know, you have over the course of 3 months, you closed higher. So that's a good thing. We don't have a lot of information on a quarterly chart because Bitcoin is still very young when it comes to quarterly type chart. So I just look at the moneymaker. And where I would be looking for now is a moneymaker buy signal. And if we see that, I think that really increases the probabilities of us seeing the low for this cycle here, because things have changed. The characteristic of the price action has changed, and we're approaching that window now ahead of the halving period, which historically has been very bullish and will push prices up more likely than not. All right, let's take a look at the monthly chart. So that was a 3-month. Now we're looking at the monthly. Monthly looks pretty decent. Again, 2 consecutive monthly candles. We haven't seen that since the bull run of 2017. The other thing you're going to notice too is if you look at the Stokes here, you know, this is, I mean, you can very simply look at this as where you want to accumulate and where you want to distribute. And this is, we're back into the accumulation mode now, which makes sense as we're coming and approaching halving. So technically speaking, this looks really good. Again, be looking for a moneymaker buy on the monthly. And that would be a good indication, again, the probabilities of this low being in. All right, so that's the monthly. Let's take a look. We'll switch charts here. Let's look at the weekly. So the weekly chart is interesting because we've broken this trend line that has been the lid on price for quite some time. And, you know, volume-wise on the weekly, we did, ever since we've come down into this range here, where prices dropped, you saw the volume come in. Okay, so the people were buying this area down here, 3,000 to 4,000, and that's why we have this rather large volume node here. But since that time, as we've been coming up, and you notice price has gotten really almost like just basically being walked up on a weekly basis. But the volume is being a little bit of a concern here. Average wise, we're kind of flat, but daily we're seeing volume starting to drop a little bit. So what's concerning with that is as we are heading into these areas where we're looking to take out these prior weekly highs. So if you recall, we talked about we want to close higher than previous weekly highs. So last week, so this is the current week bar. What we're looking for is weekly closes. So this is actually last week's Sunday evening's close, and we were right on that previous high. All right, so it'd be nice to have gotten a close well above it, but we did not. And why that's important is because we're looking for closes above these previous weekly highs so that we have, you know, higher highs on the closes. So we're starting to see that this week. This week's very important, I think, in that regard. And the reason why it's also important is because we got to look at the technicals on the weekly. There's a couple things I wanted to show you guys. One is the stochastics. Whenever we get stochastics that get stretched like this from the slower average line, the average line is basically telling you where we are in the cycle, you know, and basically this getting stretched away often can create a pivotal move against the current trend. So you see that to a certain extent here, not as strong. They get really strong when they start stretching up here. The only way that changes is if we get into volume, we break above this resistance area, which we'll look at on the daily chart, and we start seeing this line move back up now. And that would negate this setup. But right now I don't see that. This is a cause for concern on the weekly. Let's turn on the sequential here. You'll see that we have a 9 count on the sequential. And 9 counts on the sequential, you need to have you need to be aware of that. That's a possible turning point on that chart. So this is a weekly. You can see a 9 count here. It came up. This is where we first approached 3,000, pulled back. You can see a 9 count. This works both ways, up and down. Here's a 9 count on this pullback, and then we get a decent bounce back up into that trend line. So you need to be cognizant of those 9 counts. We did get a 9 count here on the bull run. This was the height of the run up, and they ran past it. So they're not, you know, nothing's 100%, right? It's a matter of probabilities. This ran past it. 9 count on that, 11,400. Ultimately, almost sees 20K after that. Then you start looking at, if the 9 count doesn't go, you start looking at the 13 count, and the 13, 10, 11, 12, 13 bar. that did, we didn't see much more after that. We had one more push above it, couldn't close above that 13 bar weekly candle, and then price fell back down. So be cognizant of that. Again, if this 9 bar is passed and then we get into this volume void here, we could see it overrun. But make no mistake, if that does blow through there, we will see a decent pullback back to this area of support, or would become support, now currently resistant. What I'm talking about there is this 4,200 level. So this rectangular area that we've drawn, as you can see, price has pushed up into that several times. Now that weakens the area. So the amount of resistance, or the power of the resistance, gets less as price probes it, and we're probing it again. I'm not seeing a huge amount of volume here on the daily that tells me, that this is going to break imminently. If it does break on really heavy volume, then I would say, okay, this area is now definitely going to be support by any pullbacks to that area. We got to be wary of a head fake through this and then back down. If that happens, we could probably see a pullback down to these other areas of support. Most likely between 3,600 and 3,800 would be the areas that I'd be targeting for that type of price action. So that's the daily action. If we drill down, guys, I wanted to show you on, like, say, the hourly chart. What you'll notice is we've had these areas where I call them attempted BARTs. Basically, they try to push price down. Normally, that would create a price action similar to what we see here, and then consolidation and back up. And there was a lot of that price action we would see where you'd have consolidation periods and then big moves out. Recently, now in the last few weeks, though, we haven't seen that so much. But we've seen attempts, and what I think is happening is larger holders that try to initiate these dumps will flood the market with sell orders, try to take advantage of that through other futures contract leverage positions, short. But notice they're getting bought right up, and then what happens is basically if that move doesn't work, they have to cover those positions, and it actually creates an opposite reaction. So that's why sometimes you'll see these spike moves in both directions, because they're trying to probe, get those short stop, or those stops to run, whether they're long stops to the buy side or short stops to the sell side, get those things to trigger to create a bigger move, but it's not really happening. So we're seeing, I think, BART attempts that just get immediately bought. So buyers, the equilibrium is in the buyer's favor, and the buyers, and these attempts aren't working like they were in the past. So just bear that in mind. But again, looking at the technicals to kind of wrap this up, I think that shorter term things look pretty decent. But again, this level is going to be an area that I think is going to be super key right now for Bitcoin. These are levels that are pretty important, and I think probably won't give up without some sort of battle. And it could be a little tricky in that we see kind of a head fake. Technicals, though, are looking good on the 4-hour. This move up on the stochastics actually looks pretty bullish, I would say. Only thing lacking, it would just be, I think, on the daily, is just volume. I haven't seen anything really volumized that is overly exciting. Weekly, again, 9 count, stochastics stretched. That's the fly in the ointment right now. So just be cognizant of that. Last thing we're going to look at is the crypto fear and greed. All right, guys. So crypto fear and greed, we are starting to creep up to those levels that would indicate that a correction is getting closer. So what I like to do is I like to see basically a print above the 65 level. Back here we had one at 64, bit of a dip, then it tried again, got up to 67, and that really was the top there. This was a top back in July 2018. We got to printed 50s, but you have to keep in mind when you are starting to probe up to these levels and the gauge is climbing, you're really wanting to see like a higher print. If you get above 70, I think at any point that's basically you just go short at that point, because that's really just going to be overbought. The sentiment, this is a great counter indicator. So the higher things go, the happier people are, and usually when everybody's getting nice and fat and happy, price tends to correct. So any print above 70 on this is a definite short, but I'm looking for whenever we get above 60, really above 65, you print 65 or higher, that's really where you need to be cognizant. If you see a move back, you get like a 65 print and then a move back down, to me that's a trigger to get short. Here was a print at 69, immediately dumped on that. That was back on February 24th. You know, if we look at February 24th, and we look on a daily chart, that's going to be back here, big dump, right? So just be cognizant of that. We are getting up to those levels where, again, correction could be pretty close. So within the next week or so, I would say. Just be aware of that, guys. Don't be overextended on any alt positions at this time. Let's see what happens. If price does break through, what you could see is basically we'd be looking for a correction to buy off the support levels at that point. So we will get you another update as things progress over the next few days. And or if price does something pretty dramatic, we'll push an update out. So there you have it, guys, on this video. Appreciate you guys watching. Hope that helped. If you guys like what we do, please hit like and subscribe. And I'll see you on the next video. All right, guys, take care. Bye.
Trade Genius.